In 2018, you published an article called Predicting Reading Problems 6 Years into the Future. What are the key predictors that speech language pathologists should be on the lookout for?
Oh, yeah. That was a culmination of a lot of years of research, and I was very excited to actually publish that paper. Uh, it's interesting. The history of that study goes all the way back to 2001 or earlier, but really the I guess the impetus was 2001 when Hugh Katz published an article in LSHSS predicting reading disability or difficulty, and he used a lot of measures. And I thought that we would like to try to replicate that, but do this with bilingual children or English language learners. And so we added non-repetition tasks, or no, sentence repetition, and a task of phonemic awareness and letter sounds. I think mother's education was a factor in that formula as well. But we did these tasks in English and Spanish, and then I decided that we should try a dynamic assessment of decoding. And at the same time, the Fuchs were working on a dynamic assessment of decoding. I didn't know that that was happening, but this happens all the time. You've got these simultaneous strands of research going on.
Which is
So
cool.
yeah. Well, I feel like anytime I'm even if I'm just like behind the Fuchs, I feel like I'm probably going somewhere right. Um, so we developed this very brief dynamic assessment of decoding. It only took about 3 minutes to administer at the very beginning of kindergarten. And we just added that into all of the other static measures, English and Spanish, and then followed those children for many years. And it did turn out that the dynamic assessment, that 3-minute measure of asking the children to recode nonsense words, which they could not do, and then teach them how to sound those words out, how to read them or recode them, and then a post test of the same words, just in a different order. That little task right there was significantly predictive of future decoding difficulty. And when we added any of the static measures onto the dynamic assessment, they did not meaningfully add to the model.
Wow.
So yeah, so when you ask what should a clinician look for, it's about really looking for the ability or difficulty learning to decode, learning that actual decoding process. That is truly the definition of a child that has a word recognition related reading disorder or dyslexia. They have a difficult time learning how to read those words. So that's what the dynamic assessment gets at. That's the core construct that it's measuring.
Wow, that is really, really something. And, I talk a lot about the power of dynamic assessment. And when you think about that, like 3 minutes, and you have this highly predictive measure of future reading. And if you can tackle that 6 years ahead of time before the child's diagnosed with a reading disorder or dyslexia or whatever it is, you can accomplish a lot in those years.
Right. That's really the beginning of the story, right? So like the beginning of kindergarten, you screen the children, 3 minutes, identify with about 90% accuracy who is going to have difficulty. And then of course you do something about it. That's the idea. And we do know that with systematic, explicit phonics instruction, we can change the course of children's lives when it comes to learning how to decode and how to read words. So children could never, it's possible that you could come in, identify that child, and do intensive intervention and intervene and prevent, and that child would never actually know that it was difficult for them to learn to read. They would never own that as a self, as something that they identify as a difficult thing for them to do.
That is like, I have chills. I mean, like, that's so cool. We need, and don't you just want to see that universally done so that we don't have struggling? I mean, there will always be some who struggle, but if you can support kids who may struggle in that way, that's really cool.